the people who stay relevant are those who are following kind of three, I guess, pillars, if you want to call it. So one is curiosity. So being curious enough to explore what is going to be impacting your field, your industry, your role in a coming future. The other one is courage. So being courageous enough to make a change and shift when it's time to do so, not being too stuck doing what you're doing and thinking that it's not going to affect you, and be courageous enough, because there's fear involved when it comes to change. And the third one is building relationships. I think no matter who you are, where you're from, what you're doing, building a relationship is going to take you further in life than any formal education, any certification, any experience.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Lyoshin podcast. Today's guest is Elena Agaragimova. She's a talent development expert and career coach and speaker, entrepreneur and podcast host and author. And so a couple of words about you. You lead in the talent acquisition right now at Horizon Industries. And you're also running a nonprofit organization called Bloom Youth, where you help young professionals develop skills for their professions and to be successful in general and things like that. You also have two books that you've written, Shift, and another one is called The Rough Guide to Awesome Leadership. And you also host a podcast that is also called Shift. So there's also a wealth of information there. So I invited you today to talk about a few things where your expertise is, I can leverage your expertise in staying relevant in the field, AI technologies and impact of AI on development talent and things like that. And also some process or procedures that organization can employ to develop talent or acquire talent to the organization. So before we jump into specific questions and topics, can you just please tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey, and maybe any pivotal moments or milestones that happened there?
Sure. Well, thank you. You did a pretty good job, overall, kind of sharing the career story and everything that I do. So I wear multiple hats. If I were to give a little bit more kind of context to it, I fell into the professional talent development kind of by accident, because I've had such a trouble developing my own career most of my career, professional life, that I kind of just did a lot of trial and error. And I realized a lot of people don't know how to go about their careers. And a lot of people have questions that I had. So, and now that's kind of why I decided to dive into this field. I originally started off in higher education, and then I was like, okay, I'm kind of getting a little bit bored. So I decided to go into corporate learning, and eventually kind of that talent development space. And career coaching just sort of felt like a good fit because of all the different experiences. So I don't necessarily promote myself as a coach as much. I just feel like it's just part of everything that I do. But yeah, so it's I've had a lot of different pivotal moments. Couple of them, I mean, I can give you a couple. One, I think that's kind of interesting and maybe scary to some people, that I've had about 17 different jobs by the age of 26. So I worked since I was 15, and I still like to credit my first job at Subway to the job that formed me as a professional, because it's a service job, right? And people don't think much of it, but it developed my understanding of other people, how people treat others, understanding what it takes to make a dollar. So I have a lot of respect for people who work in service industries, hospitality, all those fields. So I always say, it was probably one of the most developing opportunities for me there. And then up until then, I've tried so many different things. So it's been a journey. The pivotal moment was, I was like, okay, I can't keep just jumping jobs. Like, this is not normal. I need to actually figure out what I want to do with my life. And so, looking back, I think having jumped that many jobs since the age of 15 until like 26, I think it's what helped me figure out a lot of things I don't want to do and helped me create a career basically that I have today, which allows me to wear multiple hats, which allows me to be creative, which allows me to enjoy what I do pretty much every day. As crazy as it might sound to some people, I actually love what I do every single day. Maybe not 100% of the day, but 85% of the day, I love my work. And that's because I went through, a lot of crafting of being where I am today. So yeah.
Okay, yeah, great. Thanks for sharing. So let's start with the first topic, the relevance in the field. So in today's fast changing environment and changing technologies and new trends coming out every couple of years, just in general, how people can stay relevant in their field and their occupation.
So I wish I had a very specific answer for you, but it really depends, right? It depends on your field. It depends on who you are. It depends on where you are today, where you want to be, and many other factors. What I know for sure from the years of doing this job is that change is inevitable. Technological advances are inevitable. We've seen jobs come and go. We've seen jobs evolve and so on. We've seen a lot of ups and downs in the job market. The people who stay relevant are those who are following kind of three, I guess, pillars, if you want to call it. So one is curiosity. So being curious enough to explore what is going to be impacting your field, your industry, your role in the coming future. The other one is courage. So being courageous enough to make a change and shift when it's time to do so. Not being too stuck doing what you're doing and thinking that it's not going to affect you, and be courageous enough, because there's fear involved when it comes to change. And the third one is building relationships. I think no matter who you are, where you're from, what you're doing, building a relationship is going to take you further in life than any formal education, any certification, any experience. So I think if we just look at these three things and make time to make those things priorities, and it doesn't have to be intense, and I think that's what a lot of people kind of the misconception they have is like, well, I don't have time. Well, that's okay, but it's not that you don't have time. You don't want to prioritize it. So when you do become irrelevant, you know why. When you do end up without a job, you know why. Because you didn't prioritize things that are important and you weren't courageous enough to make a shift when it's time. And if you stay curious and build relationships, you will know when it's time to make a change, because you'd be exposed to information, right? And so I always like to look at increments and everything, right? The whole idea of shift is like, how can I just be better a little bit every day? And so by staying curious is like, what does that mean, staying curious? That means, maybe 10 minutes every day, 1 hour a week, choose whatever works for you. Explore, read something in your industry, read what's happening in AI, subscribe to newsletters that are focused on future work, future industries in your particular field, right? Look at kind of just what's happening in the market, read some business articles, just see a holistic approach of like see it from a different sides, like what is happening in an economy, what's happening in the industry. Really, you don't need to be an expert. What I promise, what will happen is once you start going in, like getting little pieces of information over time, it's gonna collectively come to an understanding of, oh, that's what's happening. Eventually the dots are going to start connecting and so on. If you do this regularly, you'll be in a good spot.
Okay, I understand. Yeah, that's great. And if I can translate this to kind of tactics that people can do, it includes like things for continuous learning, like doing small courses from various resources, right? Or reading books, or like you said, just reading industry news or newsletters. Those all will contribute to this curiosity and build your knowledge in general, and general knowledge of things. And then also networking is where you will build your relationships, talking to people, maybe going to conferences or going to like meetups or classes or whatever. Those things will also broaden your understanding what's going on, and you're talking to many people and you're introducing yourself. It's also building those social skills that needed in many professions. So yeah, those are great tactics and things people can employ actually to stay relevant. So are there anything from the organizational standpoint that can be done to help people in this? Because maybe I'm just a new guy who just started, my job, I'm 20-year-old or whatever. I don't know all these things. Is there any organizational things that they can help, like HR maybe or somebody and guide?
It's a great question. It's a question I think about a lot. Because I'm in this role, that's kind of my job, is helping organization prepare for these things. And I can tell you that organizations that do this well, they do a couple of things. Number one, they're more proactive. So as an organization, so I'll kind of talk about the organization and then like individuals leading those organizations. So
Mm-hmm.
from an organizational standpoint, just collectively having a culture of proactiveness. How do I say being proactive? I don't even know what's the other word I'm trying to say here, but being proactive as an organization. What I mean by that is actually having a solid strategy, right? Having a plan. A lot of times we are so reactive, and I think we're getting more and more reactive as businesses. So sure, like larger organizations, maybe they kind of have a little bit more strategy and so on, but a lot of SMEs, like small, medium-sized enterprises, tend to kind of just, it's a lot of reactions versus actually planning ahead and looking at what's coming. Something that a couple of companies do is they have what's called like future teams, and this is something I've heard from a futurist. His name is John Senay, and he talks a lot about that. I've heard him say this years ago, and he said they have these kind of future teams. So basically, you have a team, a couple of people, maybe a committee, whatever that whatever format it looks like for you. That people who get together once a month, once a quarter, whatever it is, that works for your organization, and they think about what's coming their way in their business. Again, kind of like as an individual, staying curious. As an organization, collectively, you have to stay curious. Like put together the right people in a team to together think about what might be impacting your organization and how are you going to pivot if necessary. So that's from an organizational side. In terms of like whether it's HR or L&D teams, I think collectively we can do a better job working and manage and helping our managers manage better, because at the end of the day, that's probably the group in an organization who is the most impactful in terms of the growth of the organization. It's the most impactful in terms of the talent growth in an organization. And it's the people that are running your business, essentially. These are the people on the ground. And oftentimes they're forgotten, especially the middle manager, right? They're not supported. They're not provided the resources and things like that to be successful in their roles. And on top of that, even if there are resources, like companies are like, we have a great leadership program. Wonderful. Is there a system or a process in place to support that person's development? And what I mean by that is you can have all the leadership programs in the world. If you're working this person to the ground 60, 70 hours a week because you just laid off a bunch of people, and now this person is not only managing your clients, managing your projects, managing a team, now you want this person to then develop themselves, and they have a family and they have a life, obviously. So there has to be a system and a process to support the growth in an organization, right? And I see a lot of companies like, oh yeah, like we have a great leadership deal, wonderful. How many hours is this person working? How many projects are they managing, and so on. So it's so there has to be both, right?
Yeah, understand. Okay. So there's also probably a difference between, like you said, having leadership development program and growing managers and into leaders. There's also has to be something for frontline employees, like maybe let's say development teams, and they have some sort of programs or some sort of tools that they can use for development. For example, I'll give you an example what my organization does is, and this is just internal to our smaller part of the organization. We said that every development sprint, every developer gets a few hours of individual research and development time. And they basically can pick and choose whatever they want to work on. They can go read some articles, they can write some prototype code for something, they can go, many of them right now experimenting with artificial intelligence. So it's great because once in a while they come back and they say like, hey, I checked this out, and or I built this, check it out and see, and we can incorporate and use it. I think this idea came from like Google and some other innovative companies. We're just trying to use these tools in our way. And yeah, sometimes it works great. Some people don't use it at all, and that's okay, whatever. So
Yeah. No, it's
yeah.
it's a great point. So the way I kind of look at it is that you have kind of high performers, mid performers, and low performers in an organization, like, right? So the low performers, a lot of times, and for better or for worse, is just what it is. They're probably just going to stay in that role, if at all, or they'll move on, or you'll let them go. The high performers are already doing a lot of that development on their own. The high performers don't need HR or their manager to tell them, hey, you need to look at some. They're driven internally. It's a little bit different. It's the mid performers. It's the people who have the potential but need that support, need that push, need that little, motivation to get to that next level. And this is where the manager comes in, which is why I focus more on the person leading the team, is because they're the ones who can keep them accountable. They're the ones who can follow up with them. They're the ones that can challenge them in a healthy way. And if they're not able to do that, you're probably missing out on great talent in that mid-level because you're not tapping into that potential. And so, so that's why it's like, yes, you should definitely have offers across board, like from the junior staff up until senior leadership and partners and so on. You need to have opportunities to develop, but it's people will make time for things that are important to them. And sometimes having accountability helps you understand how to prioritize certain things in your career. And a lot of younger staff, a lot of, that mid performers, that's what they need the most. That's where your most potential is in an organization.
Yeah, I see. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. So now that everybody's talking about AI and it getting, become trendy for the last couple of years, is there any opportunities there to leverage it in terms of acquiring talent or developing talent? Any examples maybe that you have?
Yeah, sure. So you mean like in the world of recruitment?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so there's a lot of really exciting things happening. So I actually one particular company. I was just at a conference a couple of weeks ago. I got to meet the leadership team of the company, and they're doing something really cool. They're called Avenica, and so one of the biggest challenges in organizations today, right, is what is the best way to screen a candidate? It is through a resume, right? Or like even if you recommend somebody, you're like the first thing person is going to say, "Can you send me their resume?" Resume, as we know, is not the best indicator of somebody's talent, let alone future success and so on. It just tells you what the person might have done. It doesn't really tell you much. So what this company is doing is they're saying, forget about the resume. What we want this person to do is this person goes into this platform. They do upload their resume, but following that, there's a series of assessments and interactive behavioral kind of assessments that takes place that helps that individual understand their potential. So we're not looking at what you've done or what you studied. We're looking at where's your potential based on who you are as a person, like your whole person, right? Your hobbies, your character traits, your values, etc. And what I love about that is that it taps into, especially when we're thinking about the future and AI, a lot of jobs, a lot of things that people have done are not necessarily going to be relevant, right? There's certain aspects of it that are going to be transferable, but they're not going to be relevant. So, you're going to have a lot of people coming up in the next 3 to 5 plus years that are going to be coming to jobs with a whole lot of irrelevant experience that they now have to find a new career somewhere else, and it's going to be hard to do. So unless we as professionals, as leaders, as hiring managers can help them figure that out, we're gonna have a huge talent shortage. We already do. It's only going to get worse. So what Avenica does is that's how they provide candidates to organizations, is by the time the candidate goes through their selection process, they come up with a profile of the person based on all these different things that the person, who they are, what they can do, all the skills versus just what they've done. And frankly speaking, a lot of candidates are not good at telling their stories. A lot of people don't know how to move from one industry to another. They don't know how to smoothly connect everything that they are that is beyond a job or a role that they've done, because there's a lot more to that person, right? So they wear a lot of different hats in their lives. So that tool helps them do that. So I think that's exciting, personally. Like that's like probably one of the best tools I've seen out there in terms of figuring out potential, because I'm a huge fan of people's potential. That's what my whole thing is about. I spend a lot of time with candidates trying to figure out, do they have the potential? Right. And I think that's what we can do better as recruiters in general, because a lot of times it's like, oh, do they tick the box? It means nothing. I don't care what you've done somewhere else. It does not determine the success of you, of your success in this future. It just doesn't. So any tool that can kind of tap into that potential to the best of its ability, at least, can probably is going to be game changing for sure. And there's other ones as well, but I think that's probably one of the better ones, one of the better AI applications.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I'm just wondering now, on the receiving end, the company who's looking for candidate, are they going to use the same tool and pick the person whose potential matches what they want to do and things like that? How does it work on the receiving end?
So on the receiving end, they will be, so there's a conversation that takes place, from what I understand. I apologize, Evenica, if you hear this and I'm wrong. On the receiving end, there's also a conversation that happens between, so there's a human involved between the candidate and the company, right? So it's more of, I have a chat with the hiring manager. Let's say I work for Venica. I have a chat with the hiring manager. I try to understand what is it that they're looking for, and then I have a potential candidate from that database. There is a matching process, like where I don't know exactly, honestly. Like I think people maybe should just watch the demo. I don't want to make things up, but what I know is that in the case study they were showing is that I'll give you an example. A candidate who applies through a ATS, like application tracking system, on a company website. There's a few of them who got denied for a job, and then Avenica passed them on to the hiring manager based on their profile, because the profile was actually in fact a match, but either the ATS didn't recognize it, or the recruiter didn't read it correctly, and so on, or didn't analyze it correctly, right? And so the ATS system ended up kicking these candidates out, and what eventually happened is that they end up getting hired and really succeeding in those roles. And that happens all the time. So I think that's kind of where it's at. So I think it focuses also more on like helping you as a professional analyze that person from all different perspectives, because again, most people are horrible at their resumes, and most resumes don't tell a story, versus this platform allows to tell that story and makes more kind of ready to go candidates that have been vetted for. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, I was just curious how this whole loop works. Okay. Yeah, that's pretty cool. I wish everybody would start using something like that, because it's a huge problem right now. I know some people who are looking for jobs right now, and it takes months and months until they get through all these ATS systems and recruiters and various levels of screening that they have to go through. At each level, a whole bunch of potentially good candidates get filtered out. So something like that analyzes and creates your like a professional profile, if you will,
Yeah.
could be helpful. And then you can just pick people for their potential and not what they've done. I like this idea a lot, actually. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. It's a pretty cool one.
So,
Yeah.
yeah. So speaking of potentials, are there any, like for any profession in tech, let's say, are there any trend things or some some potential skills that will arise and will be in demand that people should focus on?
I wish I knew the answer to that question. I'd probably be very rich if I could predict something like that. It's a great question. I wish I knew, but because I think there's just so many things we don't know, right? There's so much unknown, and I don't have a specific answer. But again, if you just look at historically, what has always been in need is the soft skills, right? Like the ability to communicate, the ability to influence, the ability to lead, and so on. So I think, that the leadership skills, whatever you want to call them, but not even just the leadership, you don't even need to be in a leadership role or anything like that, but just the ability to communicate well, the ability to sell. Because I think you're always going to be, no matter what technology is out there, you're always going to be influencing, selling something, right? Whether it's your role, your job, your product, services, company. So I think sales skills, being comfortable, and that being able to communicate articulately in a way that influences your audience. I think that's always going to be in style. I think there are going to be, of course, some technological things that we're going to know how to do. One of the things that I encourage people to do is, if you haven't taken a course on AI, there's a bunch of free ones, like IBM has a free one. There's a bunch of free courses on like machine learning, AI, just take it. Even if you're like myself, who's like, what are they talking about? Like, what is this course about? Like, I'll go in blindly. But just to start wrapping your head around what is machine learning, how is it everywhere that you are right now? And so I think just, putting yourself, into, get a little bit uncomfortable and put yourself in that situation, that's probably going to be great, because that's happening. And so, so you might as well get comfortable with it, learn, and so that whenever the next AI thing comes out, you'll be ready to, at least you'll have some idea about it versus starting from scratch.
Yeah, I see. Yeah, that's all these courses we talked about this earlier. There's so many of them on any given topic. You can learn anything right now from the luxury of your home. It's unbelievable,
Yeah.
and many people don't take advantage of this, and they just yeah, well, it is what it is.
Yeah.
So, what are some of the biggest challenges that you see right now in currently in workforce? Maybe when people trying to get a new job, or maybe when companies trying to acquire people and they just don't see those skills in people.
How much time you have? I have a lot of I have a lot of things I can talk about. Oh gosh.
Top three.
So yeah. All right. Top three. Okay. Let me choose some. So a couple of different things. Um, I'll start with kind of the beginning. I think the beginning of a career journey, right? So, because I think it's an important one. I think that I can spend a lot of time on the individual, but I think we need to understand that there's a systemic problem. And so
Hmm.
I've started in higher education. I was in career development in higher education, and there's a big disconnect between higher education and the corporate world, right? So we see a decline of confidence in higher education. A lot of people are opting out of higher education, pursuing 4-year degrees. There's a lot more, 2-year programs, associate degrees, certificates programs, and trade schools that are coming out, and a lot of people pursuing those. So at the same time, so we have on the consumer side, we have the student, right, or the future worker who is like, I'm not really going to spend, 50, 100K a year or whatever, or a degree, however much it costs. I don't know how much it costs in different states, but I'm not gonna have this loan and then and because my job coming out of college is not gonna pay for it. So you have this disconnect where a lot of the younger, a lot of the college age people are opting out to more trade schools or certificate programs and so on, but yet corporates is still like, well, we still want you to have a 4-year bachelor's degree. That decreases their pool of candidates. And sure, there are a lot of companies that are like, we don't need a 4-year degree, but it's not really, there's still a lot of hoops to jump through. So it's not really that straightforward. So I think there's a disconnect there, right? It's like, okay, so we need to just talk to it. Like the two sides need to talk to each other, right? Unfortunately, in the government space, for example, right, like we're both in the government contracting space, you need a bachelor's degree in most cases. Like I don't think I know, so that's unfortunate because there's a lot of great candidates. Anyway, so that's one issue, right? Is the disconnect. Or you have people who are graduating with a bachelor's degree but never had an internship, never had an apprenticeship. They just don't. They lack real life world skills and so on, and also ability to present themselves in a specific way. Yada yada. So there's that. There's the higher education and corporate. That's a big issue. I think that's a challenge. That's just systemic. When it comes to organizations. Number one, again, from an organizational side and from the individual side, I always like to say there's two, in this case, there's three sides, right? There's the higher education side, the individual, and the corporate. So higher education, we covered. The individual. There are a lot of people going back to not sure how to communicate their value. They don't do enough homework. They don't brush up on their interview skills. They don't know how to tell their stories. They don't invest time in figuring out their values. They don't know what they're looking for. They're blindly applying to anything and everything without going deeper into the job description. And what's happening is that you have a bunch of people applying for roles. And then what happens on the ATS side, on my side, when I get all these, my team and I get all these applications coming in, we're not going to go through all of them. It's humanly impossible at a lot of times. And we have 4 weeks to fill a role sometimes, like on average. It's about 45 days to fill a role, like most companies. So it's just, we cannot possibly interview 500 people. It's just not going to happen, or screen 1,000 resumes with a small team. So that doesn't benefit anybody. So I just urge people, like, when you're applying, if you are using, the application online, make sure you're actually going through the job description. Make sure you should qualify, because if we were to do that, maybe we'd be better off collectively, right? But that's a big ask, I know. And then, so just as an individual, like, being able to tell your story, I think, is the most important one. Knowing how to present yourself virtually in a world where we're interviewing on Zoom, just make sure you're ready for that interview. Make sure, check your connection, check your video, make sure you properly, attire, all of like the basics, which I know is so basic, but you'd be surprised how many people make that mistake. Just don't take the 5 minutes to just put themselves together. On the company side, going back to that potential, I cannot stress that enough. We're looking for unicorns half the time. We're looking for people who can hit the ground running, right? It's just you gotta be a little bit realistic. Gotta be a little bit more flexible. I always say, like, if a person can do 75% of the job, hire them. That 20, everybody has a learning curve. Look for that potential. Look for character. Look for the soft skills. And again, sometimes people who are screening these candidates are not the best people for the job, because sometimes they're just there because it's just their job and they're just doing the bare minimum, and they're just ticking the boxes, and they don't really care if you're going to get the best candidate, especially if you're working for an external agency, right? The external agency, they make money off a candidate and so on. So training people how to recognize potential instead of going checking the boxes and asking people about their 5-year plans and strengths and weaknesses and ridiculous questions that still so many recruiters and hiring managers ask. Like, get to know person as a person, and that requires you to actually care about that person and that candidate, and making sure that you're hiring talent that wants to stay and grow with an organization. So there's a lot of that in there. So I would say, like, these are probably the 3 biggest challenges. There's a lot of other ones, but these are probably the top ones.
Yeah. So there are challenges on both ends, and people lacking some basic understanding how this process works. Like, I asked my friend the other day who's applying for jobs, like, did you hear that they use these ATS systems to filter your resume, to look for keywords and things like that? And he was like, I had no idea. What do you mean? So, like, where people can get information on this? They don't teach this in school. They don't teach this in university. There are a whole bunch of career coach all over the internet that cost a lot of money to just give the simple answers. Are there any free resources or anything at all how people can get about this information?
Yeah, I mean, listen, there's a lot of free information. I mean, just on YouTube, the basics, like, I mean, YouTube, articles, LinkedIn is great, right? I mean, I myself put out so much information, so much free stuff. And the funny thing is, Vit, is that I heard somebody say, I think it was Gary Vee, he said, somebody asked him, like, Gary, like, why do you put all your top things out there? Like, you put your top advice, your secrets. And he was like, do you know why? Because 99% of people listening will still not do the work. They will not do the work to actually go and do and follow the 10 steps to start a business, and follow 10 steps to have great content, and yada yada. So it's a lot of information is there. If you want to pass an interview, if you want to prepare, there's tons of information online. You can, and I agree. Like, you don't need to pay necessarily a career coach if you don't have the funds for it, right? Like, it's helpful to have one, but you don't need one. But it just means that you need to do all the heavy lifting yourself. Can you do it? Absolutely. Yes. It's like the same thing with health and fitness journeys. Like, we all know what we need to do. It's hard. It's hard to implement, but choose your hards. Right. And audit yourself, because why people like to apply online, Vit, is because they're like, you know what, it's the dopamine hit. Like, okay, I'm going to send the application. I've done my job. Now it's up to the company. And then we get the rejection, but you don't realize that rejection means that probably nobody even looked at your resume. Like, there's a very high probability that a human being did not look at your resume, right? So applying online has a very low success rate in general, especially the more senior you go in your roles. If you're mid-level and up, forget about using ATS. Apply it for the formality's sake, but you need to also then go through your network. You need to reach out. You need to hustle your way to that opportunity, right? Because those opportunities become scarce. Like, it's less and less opportunity the higher you go. And simply, hiring decisions are not made that way. Hiring decisions, your next senior manager at an organization is not going to come from a random ATS submission or from a random database. It's going to come from somebody because it's too risky to bring on a senior person into a company. And that's what people don't understand. It's not always a fair game. It's not a fair world, but you got to think from a business perspective. If I'm a hiring manager, or if I'm a CEO of a business, it's too risky for me to bring somebody randomly. They have a great resume, great. I interviewed them, but I'm not sure. I'm always going to go to my network first. I'm always going to go to people who I've interviewed before, maybe who I've interacted with before. I'm always going to ask for recommendations from my team or people in my network and so on, which is why 80% of those jobs are not even advertised. And that's because though it's too much risk to bring in somebody we don't know, we don't trust, we don't yet seen them in action or heard something about them. And that's just the reality. Whether you agree with it or not, it's just what it is.
Yeah, that's tough. That's for sure tough. And with all these layoffs and so many people flooding to the job market right now, it gets even harder. Even like middle management positions. You go to LinkedIn and you check job posting, and there's like 3 days ago it was created, and it's already like a couple hundred of applicants there. It's a lot of people applying, and most of them are getting filtered out and not even contacted or anything. It just almost like becomes waste of time. And I feel like it's a better time better spent if you focus on networking and just talking to people, reaching out in an email or LinkedIn or whatever other social media you can think of, and just getting to know those people and probably working on this in advance. Like if you're not looking for your job right now, start building those relationships. Go talk to people, reach out, make friends, grab a coffee or whatever, have a Zoom chat in the evening. And then who knows, maybe a year or two from now, they will recommend you somewhere, or you have an opportunity to help them somehow. And that will be much better proactive approach, I think, when trying to, grow yourself or help other people to grow and things like that.
I
Yeah.
think that if I can just add there, I think that's such an excellent point because we start networking when we need something, and that is the worst time. Just don't even do it. I mean, really, like, just don't do it. Like, just, if you're not, it's about, that's why it's called building relationships. It takes time to build those relationships, right? People refer and recommend people they know, they trust, they like. It takes time for you to get to that relationship. Another thing is that a lot of people say, well, I'm horrible. I'm an introvert. I don't know how to network. And that's okay. Find your avenue. Maybe it's in your yoga class. Maybe it's in the, Discord chat. Maybe it's in a video game you play. Maybe it's in a small community. Maybe it's at a dog park. I don't know. But it doesn't have to be, you don't need to go to a conference. Maybe it's starting a podcast, right? So it doesn't have to be what works for what, there's this notion that network has to be the scary animal. It's not. You choose your own. The idea is to have as many people in your network, in your circle, right? And in the maybe not in your close circle, but like extended circle, know what you bring to the table, what value you bring. And you know what's the best way to build relationships, and not even for the sake of building a relationship, but the best way to lead in life and to make sure you stay relevant, to make sure you have that merit, is to pay it forward and to give and to add value to other people and not see it as I'm building a relationship because I'm going to need this person. No, no, no. Build a relationship with people you actually want to build a relationship. So build a relationship with people you can do something for. It's the give, 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 then take. I forget who wrote the book. It's called Give and Take. Oh my gosh, I forget the author's name. Anyway, it's a good book called Give and Take, and it talks about takers and givers, and then I think like the middle people. But the way to get ahead in anything, career or business, is give, 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 and then you take, or maybe you ask, right? Like the ask. So if you
Yeah.
focus on giving and adding value, I promise you it comes back tenfold. The key is to be genuine about it.
Yeah, even I have an example from my earlier career about this when somebody comes to me and say like, "Hey, I want to make more money," or "Hey, how do I get promoted?" And I usually respond with, "Well, go to your boss or supervisor and ask for more responsibilities." Simple as that. Ask them, "How can I help you? What project can you give it to me?" And I'll do it in 6 months or whatever. I'll work on it, and maybe something happens after that. Maybe they will promote you, they will raise your paycheck, or transfer you somewhere where it's more interesting to another team, maybe, or something like that. So having that, and you already know your supervisor. So even if you're introverted person, you're communicating with them pretty frequently. So it shouldn't be a challenge. If you're afraid to talk to them, just send them email and list like, hey, I did this and this in the last 6 months, but I want to try this and this. Maybe I can try. I see this happening many times, but it kind of happening when people are desperate for a change or desperate for something. But if you do it all the time, your career will improve itself almost like seamlessly. it will
Yeah.
continue. You will continue grow, and your salary will grow, and your role will change to higher levels and things like that. So I think, yeah, being a little bit proactive and using all these different techniques can surely help people. Yeah.
And something I want to just add here is sometimes you will ask for more responsibility and you do everything and you tick the boxes, but then you don't get promoted and you don't grow because it could be for various reasons. And that's why I was always say, like, you have to go into it with that curious mindset that you're doing this for yourself, that no matter what, you have now gained 6 months of additional skills that you would not have gotten otherwise. And guess what? You can take those skills somewhere else. Right. And a lot of people
Yeah.
like, well, I've done this, and then they get frustrated because they went in for the wrong reasons. You know what I'm saying? Like they went in because with expectations. The only expectation you have is to learn and to grow as a professional. Whether you're
Yeah.
going to get what you think you're going to get, that's out of your control. Let's hope, but don't go in with that expectation. Go in to be the best version of yourself, the best at your best. That, and sometimes the company, the manager won't recognize it, and that's okay. That's not the right company for you, but now you have more skill sets and opportunity to grow and take those lessons somewhere else, and so it's a win-win for you.
Yeah, I guess I would add a little really quick is that focus on something that you can control, and something you can't control is your supervisor giving you a promotion. Maybe they have somebody else already in mind, or maybe they have it's not the right time, and their boss is not willing to do that yet. So it could be so many different reasons. But if you focus on things that you can control and you say, I want to learn the skill, let me do this, and then you have it. That's it. That's all you get. Like, I totally agree with that approach. Yeah. All right. Awesome. So, coming to the end, so let's wrap up with final advice from you to give to any professionals, just in general, on how to stay in this market, how to stay in your job, or what to do next.
So I'll try to add something different from everything that I've already said about curiosity and courage and forgot the last one I said. Oh, building relationships. Another thing I'd like to add is audit your habits. So the shift, my podcast is all about shifting your mind, shifting your body, and ultimately shifting your life. And the reason I started is because I realized that a lot of times we focus on this one piece of our life, which can be like career, but really the holdback, the obstacle, the thing that's pulling you back is in your personal life. It's in your habits, in your routines, it's in your health. And so audit your habits, audit what you spend time on, audit how much you move, audit how much you sleep, how much you eat, what you eat, the quality of the food, how much water you drink, and all this. We go back to the basics. We're so focused on career, and that's why we're more stressed out, less productive a lot of times. You know, we are struggling health-wise in many aspects. We're burnt out. That's because we moved away from the basics. And if you don't focus on the basics of your well-being, your whole well-being, right? And part of that is also your social ties, your family, love in your life, joy in your life, fun in your life. If you just, super focused on your career, great, but don't ignore the basics. And I think because that will impact everything else. If you're not sleeping well, you can be, trying to take on more projects. If you're not eating well and you're just having, sugar crashes throughout the day, if you're, drinking 5 cups of coffee throughout the day, I promise you it's not good for you. Please revisit that. If you're not moving throughout the day, if you're not leading a healthy life, it's impacting your career whether you realize it or not. And I can spend an hour just talking about how unhealthy lifestyle impacts your creativity, productivity, energy levels, emotional responses, and so on, decision making skills, all those things. So audit your health overall.
Great advice. I think we can save that topic for the next time. I totally agree with that, and I'm guilty of it myself. Working from home and moving less for the last 3 years obviously didn't help me. So, but
Same
just
here.
something
I
to
have I
work
have
on.
my vices as well, so I have my vices.
Yeah.
Not a perfect. It's a reminder for myself and everybody else. So by no means am I perfect in this.
Yeah. Okay, well, great. I think we covered a lot of good things here. So yeah, thank you very much for your time, and I hope we can talk more in the future. And yeah, that was great. Thank you very much.
Thank
Talk
you.
to you later. Bye.